I came across something really special in my internet wanderings, and I'm going to present it here to you today. It's a bunch of different things, including a very easy to run RPG rule set that is designed not specifically for solo play, as well as some solo rules to run it, as well as a solo deck of cards that you can use with the solo rules, although you don't need them because really everything in this deck of cards can be done from these solo rules, as well as the meat of all of this for soloists are, I think it's about 27, I can't remember the exact number, one-shots that can be run with the solo rules. Now, these one-shots are not solo designed per se, but they are solo supported and integrated with them here for Tricube Tales. So this video, we're going to go over the basics of the rule set itself, and then we're going to take a look at the solo rules for it, and then we're going to take a look at some of the individual one-shots. They're in all different genres and themes, and that's what makes it so exciting, I think, for the soloist to sit down. You get the ability to basically pick up a card with the solo rules and get into a one-shot session on, it could be sci-fi, it could be some type of supernatural, urban something, it could be regular fantasy, I think there's a pirate one. It's just all over the place in a really good way. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the Tricube Tales rules themselves, and we'll take a look here at the credit, and I thank the designer for sending me this material so I can present it to you in this way. I will put a link down below to where you can get this either digitally or physically if you wish. And I want to acknowledge what the author says at the outset, which is that it started as a simple set of guidelines for role-playing with his 5-year-old son, which is really cool because as a parent, as I am, we gamer parents often have agendas to get our kids into gaming, and I think anything that originates in that way and has developed into something that is so flexible for grown-ups to use and solo RPGers to use is really cool. He said that he wants a system where the GM could handle all the complexity, and the Tricube Tales name, of course, refers to 3d6s, and that is the basis for the system, and it could be done without a lot of arithmetic. There's some light rules that involve tokens that we will get into. You can just use whatever tokens you have lying around that will indicate two different types of items. So, what is this game? This game allows you to create characters, and we'll look here at a basic character with some type of archetype that you decide, a perk and a quirk, and that's basically it for what comes in to the character sheet. You can add on equipment, and you can add on, if you have like a magic user, you can make up spells, but in terms of what actually needs to be there, that's it. It's super, super fast and super flexible. So some of the examples here are like a cyborg gunslinger, or a draconian knight, or a starship pilot, and a crafty inventor, or an orc mercenary. So it can work for any type of genre. In lieu of attributes, you have the archetype. The trait there's one of 3 traits, and that's it. That's where you assign the ability to roll 3 dice. If you are agile, you get to roll 3d6 in agile tests. If you are brawny, you get to roll 3d6 for brawny. If you're crafty, you get to roll 3d6 for crafty. Otherwise, if you are not that archetype, you would be rolling 2d6. What are you trying to get on your rolls? Well, you're trying to either get a 4, a 5, or a 6, depending on how difficult the roll is. So the challenges are A difficulty of 4 is an easy challenge. A standard challenge is a difficulty of 5. And then a hard challenge is a difficulty of 6, meaning you need to roll that on your dice. So for example, if I was agile and I was attempting an easy task, I rolled 2 6s. Well, if I was attempting something easy and I was agile, I would only need to get a 4 or more on one dice to succeed. I got 2 6s on 2 dice, which is an exceptional success. So if you get 2 successes, it's exceptional and something else happens. If I was agile and attempting a hard thing, I would still roll my 3d6, and in this case, I failed. Now, in the game here, a critical failure, you have to roll 1s on all of your dice. You could, of course, interpret a failure on 3 dice, no matter what it was, to be also pretty bad. And that's something that I have done when I've done the one-shots to provide a little more flexibility. But that's basically the mechanic in the game. So you will be given a sense of that challenge, and you will roll the relevant dice. So for example, if you were a brawny character and the challenge was agile, you would then only be rolling 2 dice. So for an easy agile challenge for a brawny character, 2 dice, you still need to get 4 or more. That is a success, but you only were able to roll the 2 dice. So the other thing that you have in your character are perks and quirks. So perks are special talents or abilities, and quirks are hindrances or handicaps. The karma and resolve is you start with 3 karma and 3 resolve. So karma is luck, it is providence, it is a positive thing, and resolve is going to represent tenacity, spirit, health, or determination. So you use these to impact play, as we will see. And as I mentioned, gear is considered a narrative tool, so you can outfit or describe your character however you wish, but there are no specific mechanics surrounding gear in this rule set. During the course of the game, the resolve will be used to be overcoming very difficult challenges. You will have to have multiple successes for difficult challenges like certain things in combat, and you will expend resolve to do that. You can replenish your resolve using karma, but if you get to a place where you are completely out of resolve, then you are out of the session. So you become defeated, and if you're defeated, then you gain an affliction appropriate to the situation. So it's very narrative based. You get your resolve back, but you usually can't participate anymore in that particular scene or story. And after a certain number of afflictions, you will be sort of retired from play. So there's not necessarily active death in this game. Opposed challenges are essentially rolling and getting the high number or the most number of successes. And NPC confrontations are sort of a similar situation. We look for combat, same kind of situation, that when you have an NPC interaction that's combat, there's a difficulty level for the foe, and you need to overcome that difficulty level. And it's all very flexible in terms of how it plays out, because it is narratively based. So the quirk is kind of interesting, because if you decide you want to use your quirk for a challenge, in other words, make something harder for yourself, you can do that. That would increase the native challenge level of that challenge. But then if you are successful, you can regain a karma for doing that. And again, the karma ultimately can be used to regain your resolve. So that is a way of the mechanics encouraging you to use the parts of your character that may be challenging to overcome and get through your story, because doing that will allow you, it will bolster your resolve, or it will continue your resolve. So for example, if you're this brawny orc and your quirk is that you're greedy, but you encounter, say, a treasure chest, and you are needing to resist the urge to pocket some of that treasure for yourself instead of bringing it back to the party, you could involve the quirk in that. You're working against your quirk, and it makes it even harder. So if it would have been a standard challenge to get all the treasure out and deliver it, for you as a greedy orc, it becomes a hard challenge. If you succeed in that, you will be able to regain some of the karma that you spent. I mean, it's good karma to work against your quirk. So the perks and the quirks do work to give the character more three-dimensionality than you would expect from just essentially having like one attribute, either the brawny, the crafty, or the agile. And that is basically the rule set here. Now, and the rest of this book talks about ways in which to use some of these rules in various different types of settings. But that is essentially the rule set here. Now, so the solo rules come on these cards if you get the physical components of them, and there are five double-sided cards, and they are a combination of specific tables for various types of settings. So we have wilderness tables, urban locations, we have some generic tables here with iconography for narrative twists, which we'll talk about. We have magical settings. We've got voyages, seafaring voyages, and dungeon crawls, of course, as well as a page. This is really the only page I think that wasn't probably completely necessary. I think this could have offered different information, but there's a whole page of just names for places and for people. And the social interaction page, the NPC page, we have a demeanor, speech and mannerisms, and something about like why that person is of interest. What I would have liked to have seen here instead of a name generator would have been something that was more like the person's role in the world. So whether they were a pirate or a mercenary or a magician or whatever, that would be key to the variety of the settings. I think that probably would have been a better use of this landscape space. But in any case, going back to the first page so we get a sense of how this works, it explains that you will first choose a one-page setting and create a character. You're going to write down the main plot for your adventure using the settings adventure generator. We'll get to that, and two subplots to develop your adventure. And I have played a bunch of these, and you come up with very different things when you do this. So let's take a look at the Deep Trouble in Old Port Bay to show how this works. So all the one-shots, all the cards follow the same organization, which is really great. You have a description here. So in this case, several days ago, an immense storm ravaged the coastal town of Oldport, knocking out the power lines and phone masts and flooding the streets with several feet of water. By the next morning, the worst of the storm had passed, but a mysterious black obelisk had appeared in the bay. Many people attempted to escape on boats. You are a group of survivors, holed up in your apartment complex. A couple of days ago, one of your neighbors transformed into a monster, killing several residents before escaping down the elevator shaft. But where is it now, and are there more of them? Will you attempt to escape or wait to be rescued? So you are walked through the character creation here. Now, in this particular case, I didn't want to play a group. I just wanted to try to play one person. So I made my story this way. You are rolling on the table to generate the latest scenario. So you are coming in, you've got your story, but you're sort of coming in the middle, which is awesome. And what I rolled up was that the survivors must aid other residents inside a locked door while dealing with the thing outside. So in a sense, a restatement of this, but I translated this into my character, Duke. I made him a retired cop, a brawny retired cop who was skilled at doing things stealthily, but he his quirk, his drawback was that he suffered from PTSD, and therefore he had a tendency to kind of freeze up during moments of extreme danger. And I called it like the anxiety die, that he was going to be having to have this anxiety penalty. His preferred combat style was a melee style with a pistol. And again, this is something narrative that the rules suggest you do. I don't think I covered that when I went over them, but it suggests you just choose a narrative for your combat style. Again, not mechanics based, but just narrative based. So that was how I began my story. And then following the solo rules, it has you then roll up 2 subplots using the settings twist table for inspiration. So every one of the settings has this twist table. It's icon based. It's a 2d6 roll, and you get these little pictures there. And what I rolled up based on these pictures, I forgot to write down my die roll, but it had to do with that there was something to do with ice and weather and electromagnetic disruption. So I extrapolated that out to be the fact that my character was in this apartment building, and there was the threat of electrocution as a sort of time pressure element, that anything that was happening regarding this locked door that the residents that he needed to save were behind was going to be additionally threatening because there was this weather situation with the threat of electrocution. And I created a timing mechanism for that, where he was going to be running out of time because the storm was going to be approaching and getting extra difficult. So you use this to create your twists, or if you don't want to use that, in the rules themselves, there is a card that has more iconography by genre. So if you're doing fantasy, horror, or science fiction, there isn't very specifically an urban one. This one is like urban, so I guess I would have gone to the horror one if I wanted to use that. But sticking to, you really do have this keyed to the actual story itself, and this comes on each card. So that's a good thing to focus on and use. So that is the next step that you do. And then what you're doing is to play out the story. It's instructing you, it's explaining, you know who you are, where you are, and what you need to do. You proceed with the adventure as normal, except instead of asking a GM, you roll the dice and interpret the results. So they are here giving you some things to roll on if you're asking a question that is not a yes or no. So in the case of my story, I started out by just rolling on the table here to ask sort of where to interpret these results as to where I began, and I came up with that there was a group gathered at City Hall, and that my character Duke was the one who was being nominated to go into the town to find these other residents at the apartment building. And I didn't do this, but what you could do is just say, like, when he gets out into the town, is he going to be hampered by the weather, for example, initially? And the answer here is yes. And then if you wanted to add a caveat, you could say yes, and as he's walking, he finds some driftwood or broken wood that he picks up to use that's going to help him in some way. Or you could get more detailed with it, for example, and to give more backstory, say, well, why is my character the one being nominated? And the answer here has to do with betrayal. So that puts a different twist on the story, that maybe the Duke, who is this retired cop, maybe one of those survivors in this complex was a criminal that he had failed to find in his past life as a cop, and he knows this guy is inside this residents. So while he's being a hero, quote unquote, to try to save them, he has his own agenda because he has been betrayed by one of them, and that's his real motivation for going to find them. So if you went down that path, you could go to some of the other cards here to get something more about your NPC, and it would be perhaps this table here. Let's see. Behavior or sin. So perhaps the criminal that is the one that got away, his thing that he did was really, really, really bad. So there's the second layer of the story here, that Duke is not only going to rescue the people in this apartment building, but he's going to bring this guy to justice who is a really, really horrible person. And you could build out that storyline along with your main storyline. So how do you know what's going to happen? How do you know the challenges that the character will undertake? Well, this is where you get to the random scenes. So you're given here on the solo cards a instruction that an adventure consists of 5 to 9 scenes, which you can track using a deck of standard playing cards. There's also the specific Tricube Tales solo deck of cards, which you can use, but you don't need this. It's a nice adjunct, but you don't need it because you have all of the information here that you could use based on your own cards. So every scene, you draw a card, you place it up in front of you, and then you either look it up on this table if you're using a standard deck of cards, or if you're using these actual cards, you just look at the card itself and you would turn it over, and it gives you an information here of what to do. Well, this is a scene change, so as the first card, I would actually discard that or shuffle it back in because that's not going to be useful to here. But here, in this case, it tells us that what we are facing right now is a standard brawny challenge. So in this particular case, what that would mean, let's say, is that as Duke is going out into the streets, the water is rushing by, and perhaps there are a bunch of overturned cars or something that he has to push his way through to continue on down the street. And for Duke, because he's a brawny character, he's going to be rolling 3d6 in order to do that. A standard challenge is he just needs to get a 5 or more, and indeed he gets 2 6s, which is a strong success. And so that's how you would continue on. And you can notice here on the cards, there's a victory or loss. So if you're successful in doing something, you put the card to your right, and if you fail, you put it to your left. The reason that you do this is another built-in timing mechanism for helping you know when the session is over. So it says as you're placing cards, you're going to be looking at the numbered cards, and if you have 3 to 4 of them in one suit and 2 of another suit, you're getting to the final scene. So you presumably, with a shuffle deck of cards, I don't know what the odds are of how many scenes that will take, and of course you are going to be pulling these in for various challenges. So you may be relying on them more or less, but the suits do come into play that way. So it's going to be giving you, and if you're paying attention and using that rule, you'll get a sense of the momentum of building your story, and maybe it's time to draw your story to a conclusion. Of course, you can always just continue on and not use that conceit. And so we can see here that we did look at that Joker. There are the Jokers. So the number cards will give you what we just had, different types of challenges and different ranks of challenge. The Jokers, the face cards, is going to give you something to do with your subplot. So in this case, the Jack is going to advance a secondary subplot in a positive way. So in the case of our brawny guy Duke, that might mean perhaps we would turn to the criminal who is escaped, and maybe something bad would happen to him independently of us. You could just switch the scene to the apartment building and say that this criminal, is somebody found out that he's a criminal and now he's cornered by the people, or something like that. A king is going to advance your main plot and draw a card again. Your queen is going to advance your primary subplot to draw again. And the ace or the joker is going to just totally change your scene. So this is, again, you could change your scene whenever you wanted to, but in this case, if you're using the joker to change a scene, you then roll a card and it will say, oh, you're in a new location, and roll. So in that case, it would follow perhaps then the suggestion of conceptually moving to the apartment building and developing something to do with that escaped criminal. Okay, so with that, you get this feeling of your character is like going with a vengeance to rescue, yes, but also exact revenge on this guy. And it's raining, and he's this brawny character. It's probably dark and misty. That is the feeling you get from that adventure. However, what's so cool about the system is it's all over the place, like I said, in a good way. So another one that I played was Mine Runners, and this is more traditional fantasy, and I did that so I could show you a little bit, because in this one I did play a group. I made a group of characters to follow this story. The dwarven city of Merdum was once a rich and thriving subterranean realm nestled below the northern mountains, but the miners dug too deep, unleashing something evil. Writhing shadows bubbled up from the depths, transforming the hapless populace into a ravening undead horde. Maybe that's ravaging undead horde. So in this particular story, I decided to go with the concept that we were going to be a bunch of different characters. And so I made Thor, who is the brawny warrior. I made Nimble, who is the agile scout, and Sir Knight, who is the crafty engineer. And then developing this further in the roles that I did, I gave Sir Knight some spells. So I rolled up on the some spark tables to create, that are in the solo rules, to create a couple spells for him, and he has earthen magic. So he has the ability to transform the earth around him into earth armor. He has the ability to make a bottomless pit appear anywhere, and he has the ability to stun an enemy, which would lessen the challenge rating thematically. Their mission is to provide assistance to someone in a distant passageway while dealing with a trap or an ambush. And I rolled up, again, using the solo rules, a feature of this area is odd paraphernalia. And I decided that the twist I rolled up was justice and guards. So again, this came out thematically actually somewhat similar now that I'm thinking about this, but maybe that's more me than the roles, that I decided there was some type of connection between the trapped engineer and Sir Knight, who himself was an engineer. And something is going to have to do with the story, is going to have to do with fixing this machine or something like that. He is the engineer who is underground, is running the equipment that will transform the beasts that are running around into the servitors of the people who run the mine. And I got that from getting some spark tables about the beasts, that they were chimeras or hybrid beasts. And so I decided that this was all sort of mechanical and a little bit gnomish. So that has a totally different flavor than the other story that I showed you. And what I want to do here in the rest of the video is just give you a quick look at some of the amazing range that the designer has in what he has put together here. And it is we're not gonna have a chance to look at all of them. There's just so many. But again, they follow the same format, and there are a bunch of sci-fi ones. And what I didn't show you here was there are D6 tables, or these are described as suggestions of things that you yourself could use that are related to the first table of generating a story. If you needed some more specificity or help in that, you could roll on a discoveries, the worlds, the complications. And thus you get even more prompts, random prompts that you can use to take yourself through the world of that story. And you can see even, so for example, here's something totally different, a Welsh werewolf, and it has this is the name of the town that it is in, and it is, again, the description, several sightings of a huge black dog near the village of that, hilarious. The locals speak about a mythical werewolf, but most people suspect it's just a feral mastiff, if not an elaborate prank. And the generator and the tables here for different things, examples of sightings that could be found, locations in your world, complications that might ensue, and again, the twists. And so the prompts here for the twist, the pictorial prompts, you can see they're different on each of the cards. And that makes it just so great because the designer has done the work for you of putting together things that can be interpreted but will have some loose relevance already to the story. This is Halfling Hustlers. Halflings lived happily in their peaceful village, drinking ale and tending their gardens. But as the nearby town of Stonebridge expanded its borders, the small folk were gradually driven from their homes and forced to adopt an urban lifestyle within the human settlement. And you can see what they're going to be hatching a plan to do and where they're doing it and what they're going to be dealing with while trying to exact their plan. And you have various objectives, locations, and complications suggested here. So totally different feel here. This is Guardians of the Shadow Frontier, a darker theme of wars and looks like battling emperors and kingdoms. And you have kind of broader themes like conspiracy theories and large settlements that are being destroyed. So that is something pretty expansive. Back to a sci-fi, you have a Interstellar Smugglers, which are, you have a suggestion, they have a mission of needing to smuggle something to and from and what they have to deal with that. And you have, again, objectives for the mission, maybe what they are smuggling, a scientist or some moonshine, locations where they're going or what they're encountering, and complications along the way. There's Interstellar Mech War, Bounty Hunters, Laser Knights. The knights have been ordered to rescue a dignitary, gather evidence from a volcanic planet or a city planet, while dealing with a vicious crime lord or military tensions. So kind of space opera-ish. We have some wise guys here, bosses of the 5 families in Chicago. Godfathers lost their grip on Las Vegas. A breed of dons risen for war against the Justice Department. You've got a crew putting together and what they're dealing with here. So kind of like could be a heist or some such, breaking in to a casino or a hotel. Something that, something like this kind of setting would be the sort of thing I think that, again, for a one shot to just involve yourself in this sort of story with the specific support of like the urban tables here, I think it would enable a kind of solo play that would be very hard to get somewhere else without going into seeking out a whole other rule set. And here's another sci-fi one. People awaking from cryosleep to find themselves on the wrong planet. And they converted a vessel to an underwater habitat. and you are playing a crew or a person that needs to deliver something, investigate a situation from the habitat or the surface, and you're dealing with an unknown species or scavengers or thieves. And the familiar tables now. Dark Tales of Morden. I'm just gonna, maybe I'll just pause on these if you want to read some of the description here. Let's see. Stranger Tales. This is a kind of a, well, you can see from the picture, a kind of like a urban, kind of like a rural horror kind of scenario here, where you are looking for lost treasure or locating a missing kid, which leads you to the nearby woods, and then you have to deal with some local sheriff. So maybe it's Halloween night, and there's strange goings on. There's a sinister sibling or an eldritch artist. Someone has been defacing public buildings with graffiti, but their art incorporates occult symbols. Are they performing some dark magical ritual? So again, very, very, very different from card to card. Here's some goblin gangsters. If you want to get into fantasy, there's some warring goblins who are trying to get some secret information from somewhere and deal with some rival camps, and they might be going into a forest, or having to go over the Troll Toll Tower Bridge, one of the few bridges in the world still operated by trolls. This huge suspension bridge is a popular tourist attraction, but don't feed the trolls. So a bit of humor here and lightness to them. And speaking of lightness, we have a Christmas Capers one. Every year, Santa fills his sack with gifts and takes to the sky on his magical sleigh. But the unsung heroes of the story are Santa's wife and helpers. You are Santa's helpers. You're sitting down to enjoy your day off when an emergency alarm starts ringing. Santa has gotten himself into trouble yet again. So you get to possibly rescue Santa from a house and dealing with a mixed up delivery or something like that. Here is a sort of weird West Eldritch-ish detectives one, where you're investigating a mystery, you're investigating a mysterious death on a passenger train while dealing with some dark revelations. Destinations, there's a ghost train or a hotel, a cabin in the woods. Here's the pirate one that I mentioned, and you will be playing a pirate who is pillaging and plundering a coastal fortress, dealing with a supernatural threat or perhaps a rival pirate gang. And you could be at a sunken city or a smuggler's cove. You might be dealing with some pair of beautiful sirens taking up residence on the nearby rocks, trying to enchant you away. So that is a brief look. We have a firefighters dealing with an emergency. Here is a Wardens of the Weird West. Some more goblins, some zombies. A metahuman uprising. This is a dystopian urban landscape, hellscape, or summer camp slayer. So a kind of final girl-ish, perhaps, situation here. So again, it's an incredible array of different genres and themes and stories that you can develop following a similar format and supported by the solo rules and the tables that come with them. So we didn't really look specifically at, here's for example like an urban location table. So it's telling you to interpret this within the context of the setting. It gives you events that you can use to develop your story and play out something that can go maybe 45 minutes, I would say, 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how how many scenes you run, whether you write down the events as a story or you just kind of run through it in your mind. I began by writing it out, but then it just flowed so naturally. I ended up just kind of thinking about what was happening and abandoning writing things out as I ran through the deck and the story, and that made it run a little bit faster. So I'd say 45 minutes to an hour playing these out, and of course it's really within your control as to when you end anything, because you're playing it solo based on the non-solo rules. So that is a look inside a really unique offering, I think, for soloists, the Tricube Tales and the solo rules.